I was fired by a CEO who didn't even realize I was the only one who spoke their language. They didn't just fire me, they erased me. The new CEO, who had never even met our partners, walked into the boardroom, shook my hand, and told me I was no longer aligned with the company's direction. What he didn't realize was that I was the direction. I had built the partnerships. I knew the clients, their quirks, their pain points, the very lifeline of the business. And I said nothing. Not a fight, not a plea. I just walked out and chose a different battlefield. If you've ever been underestimated or quietly pushed out, subscribe and share your story in the comments below. They called me in like it was just another quarterly sync. No tension in the air, no warning signs, just a usual sterile conference room, glass walls, recycled air, and 4 people who didn't matter sitting in chairs that used to mean something. The new CEO, Eric Vance, sat across from me, smiling like he was about to offer me a promotion. But I could read people better than they knew how to speak. His shoes were too polished, his hands too still, and the folder in front of him was closed, not opened. That's how I knew this wasn't about data or performance. This was execution, gift-wrapped in corporate manners. "Lori," he said, voice smooth like he'd practiced it on the drive-in. "We've decided to move in a new direction." He paused like I might want to protest. I didn't. I let the words hit and slide. I glanced at the others. One couldn't meet my eyes. Another clenched her jaw like she was doing me a favor. The last one just blinked like it was a screensaver. Not one of them understood what they were throwing away. I was the only person in that building who could walk into a room full of difficult clients and walk out with signed contracts and loyalty you can't buy with perks. But no one asked, and I wasn't going to educate them. Eric slid a packet across the table. Severance, legalese, HR prepped bullet points. A paragraph that said I was instrumental to the company's growth, followed by 6 pages on why I was now redundant. I picked it up, weighed it in my hand, then folded it in half and placed it in my bag. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said, because I'd been trained to be polite even while bleeding. No emotion, no panic, no bargaining, just silence wrapped in a silk scarf. Eric looked confused like he expected a scene. People like him always do, but I wasn't there to perform. I stood, adjusted my blazer, and walked out of the room without a sound. The hallway outside was longer than I remembered, empty like the building knew something was ending. I didn't stop at my desk. I didn't collect the photos, the awards, or the years I gave to people who thought I was replaceable. I just kept walking, and the silence followed me out to the parking lot like a shadow. I didn't go back. Not for revenge, not for answers, not for closure. I went in a different direction. They never really saw me. Not when I led the restructuring that saved our Asia division. Not when I renegotiated the vendor deals that cut our annual cost by 18%. Not when I flew cross-country with 2 hours' notice to salvage a contract someone else almost destroyed. They saw the results in their quarterly decks, but they never saw the hands that built them. That was always fine with me. Visibility wasn't my currency. Influence was, and I had more of it than anyone realized. What they didn't see was that I was the only one our legacy partners actually trusted. I knew which CFO had a newborn and didn't want to be on video calls after 5 p.m., which VP hated buzzwords, which account director would quietly raise prices if we didn't proactively check line items. Those weren't notes in a CRM, that was memory, experience, and instinct. The kind of institutional knowledge you can't upload to the cloud. Eric Vance didn't ask. He came in like a man with a hammer looking for nails. And I just didn't fit his vision. He wanted fast growth, not stable ground. He wanted headlines, not relationships. He wanted people who said yes sir, with 2 monitors and a Slack shortcut. What he got rid of was the only person who had been in the room during every major contract negotiation since our second funding round, including architecting the crucial KPI system for a $60 million deal. The irony, I would have helped him win if he'd asked, but he didn't, and I had no intention of waiting for him to realize it. After I left, I took exactly 3 days to be angry. Not outwardly, just quiet evenings where I sat on my porch with coffee and remembered every moment I carried someone else's weight and let them take the credit. And then, on the 4th morning, I answered a message I'd left unread for 6 weeks. It was from a startup I'd once consulted for. Small but smart. Lean team, no layers of fluff. They were solving a real problem in supply chain visibility. And they were doing it the right way, by listening. They didn't want a resume. They wanted to know how I thought. I flew to Seattle that weekend. The founder met me in a coffee shop. No suits, no egos, just we're trying to grow and we don't want to do it the stupid way. Can you help us? That was it. No pitch deck, no nonsense, just a quiet understanding. I told them I wasn't interested in titles. I was interested in impact. We talked for 3 hours. By the end of the week, I was on their payroll, not as a VP, not as a figurehead, but as the one building the architecture of their partner model from scratch. I didn't tell anyone from my old job. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't make noise, because what they didn't see when they fired me was that I don't rebuild. I rewired the whole system from somewhere they'll never think to look. We didn't try to be loud. That was never the plan. While the old company flooded social media with forced culture posts and self-congratulatory press releases, I was across the river in a brick warehouse that smelled like ambition, helping build something that could actually stand. They had 10 people and a problem. Clients didn't stay. Churn was quiet but brutal. I walked in, listened for 2 weeks, and found the gap no one else was looking at. Trust. Not product flaws, not pricing. Trust. No one had built a bridge between operations and the client's language, so I did, from the inside out. I rewrote the onboarding scripts, shifted the cadence of the follow-ups, created a real-time dashboard for partner pain points, and most importantly, I called every top-tier client myself. Not with a pitch, but with questions. Within a month, retention stabilized. Within 2, we had repeat referrals. No incentives, just results. And every move I made, every process I shaped, I did with one quiet goal: to make us the answer to every complaint I used to hear on the other side of the table. My former company had grown bloated, too proud to listen. We moved lean, thoughtful, and fast. They assumed the small players weren't worth noticing. That's what made us dangerous. One of the accounts we landed early on was a logistics firm that used to be under my old umbrella. They didn't even realize I was behind the new proposal. They just liked that someone finally understood their concerns without treating them like an invoice. I knew their pain points because I'd been the one to patch over them in the past. But now, I had the freedom to solve them at the source. I didn't poach. I didn't need to. Word travels on its own when your product speaks louder than your marketing. Every new contract wasn't just growth. It was pressure applied to an old structure that had taken me for granted. And the more success we had, the more I noticed something shift in the industry. People started whispering about the quiet rise of the company across the river. I never corrected them. I never claimed credit, because real power isn't in being seen. It's in being unavoidable. And the more open our door became, the more theirs started to close. I eschewed drama, not with fire, just slow, silent erosion, the kind you only notice when it's already too late. They always measured value by noise. Vanity metrics, inflated projections, applause in all-hands meetings. I didn't. My metrics were sharper, colder. Retention velocity? partner stickiness, reaction delay, and crisis response. I spent months quietly engineering a system not just to outperform theirs, but to anticipate the exact blind spots I once had to patch from within. What I built wasn't louder, it was smarter. We took everything they dismissed as low impact and turned it into our tactical edge. We eliminated churn by designing onboarding around the psychology of first-use trust. We flattened client handoff processes to remove latency. I designed a modular operations stack that allowed us to scale without permission, without waiting for more staff or middle management. Every time they released another bloated update, I watched the market groan. And every time we launched something, it landed clean and sharp. Our clients started speaking for us in their own networks. I didn't call that a win. I called it inevitability. Then came the federal logistics bid, a 7-figure contract, 4-year term, public oversight. They were confident it was theirs. After all, they had the legacy, the certifications, the PR firm to package their pitch like gospel. But what they didn't have, what they'd never invested in, was comprehension. They didn't understand the underlying infrastructure problems and rural distribution. I did. I'd flagged them years ago, back when I was still at their table and had been told it was outside scope. But this time, I had a platform that listened. So, I built a pilot model, mapped it to the procurement specs, and stitched it into a full proposal with real-world test data from 2 of our current clients who'd agreed to participate. No flash, no corporate theater, just truth. When the RFP was reviewed, we didn't just meet the criteria. We rewrote what was considered scalable innovation. Their pitch was polished, rehearsed, backed by consultants who'd never touched a loading dock. Mine had grease under its nails and a timeline with built-in contingencies for labor shortages, regional power outages, and client-side integration lags. Their CEO did the pitch himself, dressed like he was running for office. I watched it online from a coffee shop 2 blocks from our office. When our time came, I didn't speak. Our head of engineering did. I sat in the back, silent, anonymous, because this wasn't about proving I still mattered. It was about showing what happens when someone who listens builds from the ground up. We won the contract, not just because we were better, but because we were real. A week later, I got the first text from someone in my old department. "Wait, was that you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to, because if they were just figuring it out now, they'd already lost the game. They had already begun telling themselves a story before we even stepped into the final negotiation room. In their version, they were the giant. We were the noise. They believed reputation was a shield, that old contracts and boardroom memories still bought loyalty. But reputations don't scale when clients start asking questions you've never bothered to answer. And the deal on the table wasn't just big, it was loud. It came with media, investors, and scrutiny. The client was a major national distributor preparing for a public-facing expansion. This was the kind of partnership that didn't just make money, it made headlines. The kind that redefines who sits where in the industry. I already knew how they would approach it. Oversized team, slide decks full of buzzwords, legacy metrics polished to look like innovation. I'd seen it. I'd written those decks once in a past life, but this time I built the counteroffer. One that didn't just challenge their numbers, but their assumptions. Ours was leaner, sharper, honest. We acknowledged pain points up front. We offered real case studies, not hypotheticals. I made sure we spoke directly to the operational teams, the people who would actually use the system, not just the C-suite, and we didn't promise perfection. We promised presence, a client success team trained to respond within the hour, on-site support in the first month, transparent documentation for every API and integration. They thought they were selling confidence. We were offering control. By the time the client sat both teams down for the final decision, the mood was different. My old firm showed up polished. I showed up present. They brought titles and job descriptions. I brought blueprints and outcomes. Their CEO went first, confident, rehearsed, full of phrases like synergize and legacy scalability. He smiled through the pitch like the room already belonged to him. He didn't even glance at me until halfway through, and when he finally did, I nodded once. No smile, no bitterness, just the acknowledgement of a man who'd missed the warning signs in his rearview mirror. When our turn came, I let the team lead. They knew the system. They'd built it with me, and they knew how to speak to real-world tension. The client asked a pointed question about live disruption response. Their CEO paused, then deflected. Our lead opened a dashboard in real time and showed the actual trigger and response protocol from a recent rollout, not a demo. Real data. The room went quiet. You could feel the shift. My old company still looked professional, but they no longer looked prepared. After the meeting, I walked past the CEO in the hall. He stopped me. "You're with them now?" I nodded. That was all. He looked like someone had pulled the floor out from under him, but the fall hadn't hit yet. 2 days later, the contract was awarded to us. The client issued a press release. Media picked it up. Industry chatter turned into industry recalibration. My former company's stock took a hit. Not catastrophic, but loud enough for the board to notice. That same afternoon, I got an email, then a call, then another. "Let's talk," they said. "There's room for you here again. We can make this right." Titles, bonuses, vague references to mistakes. They offered me my old life back, upgraded, polished, as if what they'd burned could be rebuilt with a check. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because this wasn't about getting back in. It was about never needing the door again. The illusion had already shattered. All I'd done was hold the mirror up. The voicemails kept coming, some urgent, some awkwardly polite, all circling the same truth. They needed me now, and they finally realized it. The tone had changed. No more dismissive HR scripts or performance reviews engineered to discredit. Now it was, "Let's reconnect. We underestimated your role, and the best one? You were always part of the foundation." That one made me laugh briefly. Not bitterly, just with the quiet amusement of someone who no longer needed the validation. While they scrambled to patch the bleeding, I was in another time zone onboarding 2 new strategic clients who'd reached out to me directly. They didn't care about where I came from. They cared that I had answers. I had solutions. I had built something better. The competitor, now my partner, had given me more than just a desk and a title. They gave me space. I hired talent they would have overlooked. I launched programs that didn't have to go through 6 levels of politics. I listened to the clients, the engineers, the interns, and because I listened, we grew quietly, strategically. No press stunts, just precision. The market had changed, and we changed with it. They hadn't, and that was the difference. I didn't take revenge with public takedowns or loud exposés. I took it by thriving, by never looking back, by succeeding in full view of the people who had erased me like a spreadsheet line item. There was no dramatic press release about me joining the competitor, no viral LinkedIn post. I made my profile private the day after the deal. I deleted old contacts, scrubbed the past from my resume, and poured everything into what came next. The silence wasn't cold. It was focused, and it echoed louder than any speech I could have made. Every time I saw another message from them blinking with false humility, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. They weren't reaching out because they'd changed. They were reaching out because the story had changed, and I was no longer part of theirs. That was the real victory. Not that I had crushed them, but that I didn't need them. Not anymore. Not ever. The unspoken victory. In life and in business, it's tempting to believe that justice must be loud. That if someone wrongs you, your comeback should roar across headlines, ripple through group chats, or make the people who underestimated you drop their jaws in public. But what Lori's story teaches us, what the experience of being quietly discarded and slowly rebuilt from scratch reminds us, is that not all revenge needs to be noisy. Sometimes the most effective revenge is growth. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. The moment Lori chose not to retaliate, but to outmaneuver, she reclaimed her power. And when the company that dismissed her came crawling back, not because they missed her, but because they were finally hurting without her, she understood the most important truth of all. You don't need their apology to move forward. This story isn't just about the corporate world. It's about any place where people overlook your value, minimize your contribution, or treat you like a disposable tool. We all face situations where someone else controls the narrative at work, in families, and in friendships. But you don't always need to prove them wrong directly. Sometimes proving them wrong means quietly becoming so undeniable, so excellent, that they can't function without you. And by the time they realize it, you've already moved on. In our culture, we often praise resilience, but forget the discipline it takes to keep your mouth shut, let go of ego, and build something better in silence. This story reminds us, you don't need to burn bridges. You just need to make sure the one you walk across leads somewhere stronger, smarter, and entirely yours. Sometimes forgiveness is self-liberation, but sometimes silence is the sharpest knife. Not all wounds need words. Some victories live in the simple act of no longer needing their approval. How to get started today? Write down one place in your life where you feel undervalued. List 3 small steps you could take to shift your energy to something that builds, not reacts. Reach out to someone who believes in you, not to complain, but to collaborate. Turn off the noise. Get focused. Make quiet your superpower. Want more stories like this? Drop a comment if you've ever been underestimated. Your story might help someone else. Subscribe to the channel for more powerful lessons and share this video with someone who's ready to reclaim their value.